Hello, my name is Chase Maldonado, and this is my industry research for project and team management. Alright, so my four topics that I chose all relate to the video game industry and how each one can affect games in its entirety and the industry with it. Violence. I chose violence, it sounds a little vague. More directly, violence as it relates to the players and how violence can affect player feelings and emotions. Um, it's very important to keep those in mind when creating video games so that you're not overloading players and causing friction with the media. Storytelling is another topic in which I look at the difference in how we have gone from linear stories with set bridges and key points to a more open-ended, free-thinking storytelling basis, and how that's impacting player response. Women, females in general, how they are interpreted by the gaming industry, how they're being reflected upon, and what kind of problems this can cause. And finally, the LGBT community actually has a larger following in video games than first thought. I believe that the merging of the gaming industry and the LGBT community can be very beneficial for both parties. All right, violence. The research that I did was very interesting. It noted that focus, as in the depth at which a player is involved with the world of the game, is actually more focused when in third person than in first person. Most games right now, a lot of first person shooters are all, like I said, first person, but this actually doesn't create the kind of response that was originally and initially thought of. Once again, interestingly enough, men respond very similarly both third and first. But what really tips the scale is women respond much more efficiently in third person than in first person. And so combat and violence in that sense of how they will be interacting will change and cause changes thereof. So the research that I found and was looking up indicated that the more blood and gore that was in a game, the higher aggressive traits show up in those players. So the study that was done involved two groups, each playing the same game. I think it was a fighting game. One game was played entirely with no blood in the game at all. The other one had a blood setting on it where the players, when hurt, would gush blood or whatever. And it was interesting to note that the group of players who played with no blood at all had significantly decreased aggressive traits than the ones who played with gore. The ones who played with gore, when asked about simple daily questions, solve simple puzzles, basic brain activity, responded with a lot more anger and a lot more harsher tones than the other group. Alright, storytelling. Like I said before, in the past, storytelling has been very linear. And one article I read was very cool. It talked about this scientist who noticed that there are a lot of correlations between today's video games and 1950s soap operas. The storytelling and plot usage is a very similar to how soap operas used to get people involved in the show and how they kept the story going, plot twists, backstabbings, that kind of thing. It used to be very clean, cut, and dry, and now with the evolution of video games and its constant evolution, it is being added more with more drama to keep players interested into it. Also, freedom of creativity. I keep saying this. They used to be very linear. You used to go from one spot to another spot and progressively on until you beat the game. Now, they're offering a huge amount of player freedom. The player is now in charge of how they want to play the game and where that story will take them. This lets the player create the story instead of the story being narrated to the player. And once again, this creates player involvement and builds trust with that game and the franchise. Women, in general, are not viewed the same as men in the gaming industry. When players play as a female character that is done in a scantily clad outfit and generally over busty, this creates negative self-efficacy, meaning that women are being taken less seriously and therefore are less important than male characters. And a change in this needs to happen if there's going to be sort of any progress for women's rights. Interestingly enough, though, on sort of a counter argument, I found that playing as a female character versus a male character actually decreases aggression. So what we need to do in the future of video games is to take women and not use them as poster boards for new video games and try and appeal to the male audience more, but become neutral and offer the exact same thing on both genders. But we also need to balance that with knowing that playing a female will provide less aggressive traits than with a male character, which will be, I think, hard to do, but is something we can definitely achieve in the future. And lastly, the LGBT community was my last topic. The identity of the LGBT gamers has gone very unrecognized in almost all the world. It's growing and it's constantly getting bigger. It needs to be addressed, and through my research, I've seen that large name corporations are actually, or companies, AAA companies, are taking this community into its thought process when creating games. A lot more games now are starting to have open relationship sort of fields where any player can be with any other character. And this is good, and we need to kind of see more of this in order to fully accept the LGBT community in its entirety. There will be backlash. There's no denying that religious organizations, anti-gay rights, these sort of things will come and backlash and come to lobby these sorts of games. But what I found through my research was that these AAA companies aren't really caring. They're doing it anyway, and they're inserting it slowly and building up into the LGBT community where it needs to be sort of more seen and more heard of. So how do these 4 topics relate to like what I will be specifically doing in my field as a possible game producer or designer? So knowing violence, knowing what demographic I'm going to be needing to reach for when making a specific game. This will also tell me how much violence I need versus do I need any at all. And to know when too much is that's it, like when there is too much of it. Because having violence in games, I do not believe is a bad thing, but it needs to be regulated so that it's not out of control and it doesn't cause too much aggressiveness in the player. So, knowing good storytelling, actually, after reading the article about the soap operas, I'm going to start looking up more of those kind of plot lines in order to see how they react and how they work so that I can use those same concepts in future games if needed. And to know that I don't need to create a full structure. I don't need to create a whole storyline. I can create simple key points and placements within the game and then let the rest be free and open for the players to create themselves. The use of females in video games needs to be corrected. It needs to be made the same on both genders so that it can be seen that women are equally as good as male characters. This will improve self-efficacy in women. It will empower as well as sort of level the playing field, so to speak, of the industry. And I believe there will be some push, but there will be some good change that comes of it. And the LGBT community does need to be addressed as well. I believe they should be incorporated respectfully and without any overabundance. It needs to be a nice, even process. Let it happen slowly. And that will create a comfortable climate and create more agreement, more openness that will, I believe, will trickle down in the next coming generations. It's already happening as it is, but this will only improve those odds, and that will help welcome a new era of players and of storylines as well. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed, and these are my references.